Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tired Boys podcast. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone. We've got a big episode today. Some of the races didn't have quite as much to talk about in terms of action, but lots of good things to discuss across the Indy 500, Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula 1, quick hitters, all the usual suspects. But good to be back, Justin. How are you doing?
Yeah, good to be back. Yeah, maybe not the most action-packed Monaco, but I think that's that's kind of what it is, but lots of implications for the driver and constructor standings, which I think is the more exciting angle of it. But before we talk through all that, let's roll the intro first. Just
You're
this
not
chatbot for
2D.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was fun to reach out and touch you, my friend.
Circuit of the Americas is where it's a track that was created for racing.
So the race is a flat fee, and then it's the bake off afterwards where things get really kooky.
Okay, that's where all the weirdness comes in. Mercedes definitely started planning for their new car.
If Red Bull came out and was just like, Adrian Newey designed our car.
Yeah.
Whoa, yeah, did he really?
No way.
Yeah, we're back, and let's start with some quick hitters. Aaron, I know the first couple you just want to run through, so I won't hold you up here. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so one of the cool things I saw this past week, but IndyCar is going to have a Pro Series on iRacing that debuts in September. There's a $50,000 grand prize, so I assume it's just pulling from kind of like top drivers for IndyCar racing in iRacing already that are going to be pulled into a series. So that'll be a neat thing. I like the expansion of sim racing to be able to potentially be like a pipeline into some of these racing series, like Max has talked about a little bit with wanting to start a GP3 team after Formula One, or actually no, he already has it like in the works, to be able to do that, bring sim racing drivers. And with that, Formula 4 is going to have an iRacing series, esports global championship that's going to be starting up, I believe, next year. So it'll be kind of cool to see the opportunities that these different racing series bring out. iRacing seems to do a really nice job when it comes to the online events and series and different things like 24-hour championships and whatnot that they do. Whereas it feels like I saw some feedback from the F1 2024 game and handling and whatnot, and it just not being like very realistic. It seems like iRacing does a solid job with that. So cool to see them opening up more opportunities there with the esport racing series.
Yeah, I would very much agree. I think iRacing is like one of the premier like sim racers. I think if you want to like compete at a high level, that's the one that you go for. So it's exciting to hear that they're uh, opening up different series. Sorry.
Yeah, and kind of and kickstarting that. No, I'm with you. I think that's a pretty neat opportunity for people to get involved. I don't know if you'll see me in the F4 racing series anytime soon. Might be past my prime when it comes to that, but moving forward in the quick hitters, we have an upcoming episode of Hot Ones. So any of you hot wing and hot sauce lovers, Lewis Hamilton is going to be on the episode being released this week. I think it's cool. I'm interested to see what the discussions are about. I feel like it's typically due to a celebrity having some sort of new line, new movie, TV series, and whatnot that they're usually on Hot Ones. So it'll be interesting. I know he's been involved with some of the Formula One films, so that might be part of why he's in that position, but I want to see if he can handle the heat. So looking forward to that and seeing that this week. The other news, the Adrian Newey front has not changed, but I was seeing a lot of tweets online and different things like that were saying that there had been a deal done between Ferrari and Adrian Newey. It's going to be announced before Monaco. Like, hold on to your seats, hold on to your hats, everyone. And then Eddie Jordan came out and basically was like, there's no decision that's been made on anything. We're like, still no signed deals or anything like that. So no change on the Adrian Newey front and what his plans are. But there was a change with the FIA wheel cover testing and all, which they seem to have scrapped the plans, at least with the current wheel covers, to reduce the spray in wet conditions and all, to hopefully allow for better racing in those conditions. Maybe that means they've just scrapped this idea and are going to try and come up with an alternative solution. But unfortunately, that didn't yield the kind of results they were hoping that would allow us to just get some better wet weather racing when that comes up. So yeah, kind of a bummer on that. I know I was making fun of how it looked silly, but if it would have worked for good racing, I mean, I'm a happy camper. But that leads us into just brief driver news. So it was kind of put out there that Carlos Sainz has been ruled out for the Red Bull seat, which then there was some news shortly after that he was one of the leading contenders for the Williams seat. It makes sense for him to be a leading contender for any open seat, I think, since the majority of the teams are still finalizing their lineups. But Mercedes, of course, seems to be still leaning towards Kimi Antonelli. Of course, with that open door for Max if he decides to dip out of Red Bull, which doesn't seem super likely. But then I know Valtteri Bottas had been considered again for Williams and all. But the news from the Red Bull front, which of course probably helped with ruling out Sainz, was that they had made an offer to Checo for a 1-year contract. Checo had countered initially and said, I want 2 years from reports, and they were like, 1 year, take it or leave it. And sounds like that deal's most likely going to be finalized soon, securing up that Red Bull seat. The only other potential option I heard about over the past week was just considerations, of course, of Yuki Tsunoda being the only junior or like Red Bull associated driver that was being considered as an alternative for that Red Bull seat. But it sounds like they are kind of leaning towards the Checo side, even though he's had a rough little stretch lately.
Yeah, that is kind of surprising. I guess Red Bull is looking a little more long-term. But yeah, with his recent form, it's not surprising, but just like you can see that their recency bias isn't that strong. They're able to see kind of like the bigger picture, what his upside is, how he compares to Max and maybe some of the other drivers. It says a lot, a 1 year versus a 2 year contract though. But yeah, I guess that's the word I would use. Interesting to see Checo get the seat again.
Yeah, and Yuki's been implicated potentially for the Williams seat as well, so I think that there's this. I mean, they again, like, you're talking about known quantities, and in F1, it's a tough decision to kind of make when you're looking at the long term. If you're seeing other teams finalizing deals and all, and the driver market is shrinking, I feel like you do kind of, that's essentially what I expected when driver lineups started getting solidified, is that it would kind of topple the dominoes and things would shake out pretty quickly, except maybe like one or two seats here or there. And I think that's like part of it, that this pool is potentially shrinking and as teams get closer to deals with drivers, and Red Bull's like, well, we want to make sure we have it like someone locked in for this role that we know can be a solid driver and everything. Yuki, of course, has been driving phenomenally, but again, it's still a long season. You've seen Checo over multiple seasons, so I feel like that leads to just being more comfortable with that decision, even if it's the safe kind of call there.
Sure, but they're in a position where they can kind of like take a slower approach. They are not in a like, you know, CEO's knocking on the door. He wants to absolve the team, sell it to Audi. We're out of here. We suck. Like they're not in any of that kind of position, so they can just say like, all right, yeah, we'll just like take Checo for another year and then
yeah,
see
like
what
the
happens
1
after
year,
that.
yeah, definitely the 1 year deal it makes the most sense. But also just securing someone that is a solid driver and you feel good with in the team environment and all. But yeah, and leading into the last quick hitter, a little bit of a longer one. We had the Indy 500 this past weekend. It was the biggest weekend in motorsports with the Indy 500, the Coke 600, and the Monaco Grand Prix. One cool thing for the Indy 500 was it was announced that it would be available for free streaming for fans in the UK, which I thought was a great idea for kind of trying to broaden that horizon for IndyCar fans and everything. That it's such I think like trying to convince new fans who are already fans of Formula One to become fans of IndyCar. Like Formula One gets constantly sold as the greatest drivers, the greatest series, all this stuff. So going and watching IndyCar, especially as a European, for us in America, it's like, oh, they drive in America, so makes a little more sense. But the Indy 500 is so different from Formula One and other open wheel racing series. I think that's a cool introduction, and of course the greatest spectacle in motorsport. Great opportunity to kind of try and get some people into IndyCar to check it out that maybe wouldn't have had the easy access to do so previously. So I just thought that was a great idea from them for the Indy 500.
Yeah, is there a British / UK driver that is participating in IndyCar that they could get behind easily?
I feel like there's a number of guys. I feel like it wouldn't be too difficult just because of the fact that there's so many former F1, F2 drivers and all that have been that have or are racing in IndyCar. Callum Ilott, I believe, is British, so he might be
gotcha.
one who was just in the Indy 500, but I think just with the other European drivers and like former Formula One or Formula Two drivers, that probably has at least a little bit of a pull. Along with if you're a racing fan, like the Indy 500 is that it's one of the Triple Crown, so that Monaco in the same weekend definitely worth a watch if you're just a racing fan, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I just know in talking to friends about Formula One, often the question is like, is there an American team or an American driver that like gives them an easy on board? Because a lot of times it's like, well, who
Logan Sargent.
Oh, dude, yeah, it's not great. It's not great in that regard. But you get what I'm saying.
No, I do.
You know, just looking at a random board of teams and just like random names, like they have no context, you know.
Right. It's having some sort of association. Town. Yeah, definitely gives you a little bit more of a pull to or a rooting interest at least.
Yeah, exactly. That was my only concern, or not concern, but angle, I guess.
Yeah, and so with the Indy 500, one of the other cool things of having like this broadcast more, we have substitute drivers like Callum Ilott coming in and all. But we had Kyle Larson coming in from the NASCAR series, who was planning to do and unfortunately didn't get to complete the double day with the Indy 500 followed by the Coke 600. The man was just trying to be a machine out there and drive 1,100 miles of racing in a day, which is just an insane feat. I think that's how many miles it is. Might be laps. Either way, a lot of times around a circle in one day. But unfortunately, due to the weather, the Coke 600 ended up not panning out for him to be able to get over and pull the 2 in 1 day. He had the helicopter waiting for him to take him and all to his plane 17 minutes after the Indy 500 finished, and tried to make it a cool double day, but didn't pan out.
Okay, so he was, yeah, because I was going to say, because he raced in the Indy 500, correct?
Yeah, so he
Right, okay.
was Indy 500, then going over to North Carolina from Indianapolis for the Coke 600, but because of the rain delays at the Indy 500, got there late and they were going to substitute him. They had like a substitute driver starting the race for him, and he would have jumped in if it came, like if there was an opportunity to like mid race, and swapped out drivers, which is also wild that you can just like swap drivers mid race.
Right.
But unfortunately, there was rain at the NASCAR 600 or the Coke 600, which stopped the race, and then it didn't continue because they had reached the like half distance of the race. So they decided to call it quits. So he didn't get the opportunity, even though he was there. He was like getting ready. The race not restarting ended up limiting him from being able to drive. So tough
Gotcha.
tough way for it to end, especially like that's a pretty cool feat to be able to go and do both in 1 day, and for it to like there to just be enough time to do it. He said he hopes to be able to do it again, but just in general, very cool to see him in the Indy 500, and he had a really nice drive on the weekend as well. It was cool to see, and really proves a point about the quality of like driver that he is, being able to just jump back and forth between cars, or even consider doing that in 1 day.
Oh yeah, that can't be easy. And one is open wheel racing, and the other is NASCAR. So like two totally different disciplines as well. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. I'm curious if it was all the restarts as well that didn't help his case. I mean, I think there were like 4 or 5 different restarts at the beginning of the Indy 500, which
Yeah.
it like increases the parity between all the drivers and the cars. Like everybody gets kind of a shot at the lead when the pack is being bunched up over and over. But yeah, my angle for that was like, I mean, we had willpower, Herta was out, Ericsson was out, like actual class drivers just having tough days. Some early on and some kind of into the I would say like early to mid stint of the race. After that, everything kind of fell in line. But yeah, it was crazy the amount of restarts that we had.
Yeah, and just for the Indy 500 in general, like it's already such a close race because these drivers are, they're driving on the limit constantly, foot to the floor. There's not really any like letting up typically and all. So to have it that bunched up from the get go and everything and the restarts really does emphasize that quality of like a restart that you have to be able to maintain position, gain positions. I mean, looking at the like race results and everything, unlike Formula One, where the top 10 finished the same as they started. Spoiler alert. We only had 3 drivers across the entire IndyCar grid that finished in the same position they started, and it was pretty like all over the place where people finished comparatively. So I mean, just like taking any opportunity in that race to get yourself a lead really does a lot, and we saw that as well in even the closing laps of the race. Tight battle, Pato Award trying to take the opportunity and the take the lead with a lap to go, just can't quite hold on to it. Tries to break the toe in the straights and everything, but just wasn't able to really have quite the pace he needed at the end to take P1. Just a bummer for him. Like it was sucked to see how sad and upset he was after finishing in second, which I believe is second year in a row that he finished P2 in the Indy 500, being beaten out by Joseph Newgarden. So kind of a tough end to the race, but also looking at it, the pace that he just didn't have at the end, he utilized everything he had to take the lead. I was watching some highlights of his driving, and his tires were gone. Like he had one lap where he made 2 saves in the same corner where like speed wobbles, tires going, and he corrected and held it locked in and all. And then it just did it right again and kind of drifted a little bit. And he was, from what it seemed, watching the race and like watching and hearing some of the pundits talk afterwards, it sounded like he really shouldn't have been as far up as he was, but just was driving out of his mind, keeping the car safe and just really in the running at the end there.
Gotcha. Yeah, so pretty heartbreaking in that regard when you knew you were like, driving the wheels off that thing, and Newgarden just has the push to pass at the end. Yeah, dude, the scenes of them like ducking in between cars on those last final laps to like get just any kind of tow, any kind of speed advantage,
and they all swing down to the bottom of and like just anything that they can. They're going as far as possible to break the tow, and then as far as possible back to before taking the turn and everything.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
very exciting.
It's a very interesting way of racing. Like. To watch, very different from what we're typically used to when you throw these cars on an oval track.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, just a crazy end to a race that like it made its name. I mean, that was ending fitting of the greatest spectacle in motorsport. Just an awesome finish to the race. Callum Ilott, who I talked about, finishes P11. We had some just solid racing throughout. Alex Palou, the championship leader, down in P5, so driving pretty well. Alex Rossi was leading towards the end of the race, so it was a lot of changing, and with how tight it was at the end, that was pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, the thing that I thought was interesting was, Joseph Newgarden doing it back to back. He won last year. This is the first time since 01 and 02 with, I believe it's Helio Castroneves is how you pronounce the name. So yeah, not a common feat. It's like a 1 in 20 year thing to be done. So That's pretty exciting. So yeah, it was a solid Indy 500 this year.
Yeah, definitely worth if you didn't see it, checking out the highlights. And maybe that's your way if you're not a big motorsports fan yet. I don't know why you're listening to us, but no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, that'd be surprising.
But if you haven't gotten into IndyCar, that's one to definitely check out, and maybe that'll pique your curiosity. But before we get into Monaco and the race that we had this weekend, we just wanted to go ahead and pause real quick, remind you guys to like, subscribe, follow on our social medias on Twitter. You can find our links in the descriptions and everything. But yeah, we just are shooting for this 100 subscriber goal by the end of the year. And we'd really appreciate it. We love putting this out and the content out. We love being able to interact and share our thoughts with you listeners. So thank you for you all who are subscribed. If you're not, go ahead and hit that.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Back to the episode.
Yeah. So getting into the Monaco Grand Prix weekend, we had the Formula 3 race this weekend. So we had F3, F2, and F1. In F3, I watched some of the highlights and everything, didn't get to catch as much of the full races, but one of the things that I did see was Megatunif. Rough weekend for him after having a nice weekend in Imola, but gets a DNF in the sprint race, but then also ends up DNFing in the feature race, so a pretty rough weekend overall. Just in general, though, watching F3 and F2, it was wild to see the massive amounts of cars going into the hairpin, especially on turn one. Like that was wild, but it was kind of cool seeing the smaller cars being able to maneuver that a little bit easier than we see in F1.
Well, yeah, that's what's so interesting about it. And like seeing the races overall, it seems like the smaller cars have such a better capacity for overtaking in that regard, especially on like a really tight track like this. They just have more maneuverability in that regard. So yeah, places that are undrivable to overtake for an F1 car, it's a possibility and an angle for the smaller F3 cars in this regard, which is like really exciting.
Yeah, it made it very just like interesting to see and watch, and like you can see the learning curve that you have to kind of go through at a track like Monaco. I mean, we saw some incidents in Formula One, but seeing the drivers just like kind of figuring out, and sometimes not before having some incidents, figuring out how to drive this circuit that's so tight, and all was pretty just cool to see. I think as like for developing drivers, I think it's an awesome circuit to have F2 and F3 at, for them to have the opportunity. It would be great to see them add the F1 Academy there in future years as well. Like I just think it's a cool circuit to see racing on, even if it's for Formula One not always the most exciting. I mean we'll probably, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but a cool circuit for young drivers and a storied circuit for them to get the opportunity to race at.
For sure.
But in the sprint race, we had, so I know we had talked about it a little bit at Imola, but the first Bulgarian driver to win in Formula 3, Nicholas Solov, took the top step of the podium, which is it's again just cool to see more drivers from different countries, different places who have grown up watching and maybe idolizing some of the same people, or just like kind of growing the sport in their region. Cool to see more people and a more diverse winners in Formula 1, 2, and 3. So always a cool thing to be the first from your country to have that kind of success, and hopefully not the first opportunity, and being able to continue to grow the sport with that experience and all for your home region.
Yeah, definitely agree. Like we had said last time, it just is indicative of the growth of motorsport worldwide overall as these, call them emerging regions are able to produce, race winners, and then that just um uh tides lift all boats, that kind of thing. You get it.
Yeah, it just bolsters the field and everything with I mean the larger the pool of talent, the better pool of drivers you're going to get on average. So
Exactly.
like it just makes sense that everyone should love Formula One, and then that will mean the best racing ever. So all of you have to like it. But getting into the feature race again, it was like just cool seeing everyone going into the hairpin and like going three wide there. It was mind boggling to watch, but of course with that there were a lot of drivers that were kind of making contact and going through. Nicholas Solov, who won in the sprint race, ended up being the guy who knocked Megatunif out in the feature race.
Mm-hmm.
But then the winner, Mini, he was back-to-back feature race winners in Monaco, so last year and this year, comes out with the win. I mean, pretty impressive from him to like have that experience and everything from last year, but also to be able to carry that forward into a solid finish in this year's Monaco Grand Prix and taking the win there as well.
Yeah, especially when like F2 and F3 tend to be it's not a long-term drive for a lot of the drivers. It's more of like a short-term series where like you're hoping it pays off into something else, right? So not often are drivers, I think, presented with the opportunity to like defend their win from the previous year kind of thing. But yeah, Mini getting back-to-back dubs in Monaco is pretty exciting for him, obviously. That's next time you see him there, you just say, yeah, this driver goes well around here, has won twice here in Formula 3. That's a solid stat to have, in a racing world where you don't get too many opportunities at each of these tracks. That's solid to have one under your belt that's like, yeah, I win here. That's sweet.
100%. And like for you saw it a little bit with the like F2 or even F1 drivers. They'll talk about how many like, oh well, this rookie won at this circuit back in whatever year and everything. And so it does matter like the experience you have, the comfortability and everything there. So back to back is pretty impressive. But shifting over into the Formula 2 racing weekend and everything, we saw a few incidents get penalties for some of the drivers. Behrman, Correa, and Maini both, or all three, ended up with penalties from qualifying. Isaac Hadjar, I'm sure you saw the clip of him dodging out in the tunnel from hitting one of the other drivers, which was just, I mean, the reaction time, and not everyone was talking about the reaction time of dodging the other driver. For me, what was the most impressive was him dodging, but also just like not crashing at all. Like he had control of the car the entire time. The tires stuck well for him and everything. I was just as much impressed as the control after a jerky movement in the tunnel as I was with the actual just reaction of dodging the other car going slow there. But yeah, a scary moment, I guess, with that just coming in hot.
Yeah, because especially there in the tunnel, like those walls are closer than many of the other sections. Like that's not that would not be a great place to crash, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know whether he was had missed some like it's unfortunate that it even came to that. You would hope that the team would be
Sure.
on the radio a bit sooner, or that either lights were followed, or the different blinking flags and whatnot were out in time to get his attention and everything. But yeah, a really just crazy save there from Isaac Hadjar to avoid a bad incident during the practice sessions and all. One thing with the qualifying for F2 that I found really interesting was the breaking up of the grid into two different groups for the qualifying. I thought that was kind of cool. They had one driver from each team in two separate groups for the qualifying sessions, which I feel like just makes better sense around like a circuit like Monaco where you've got 25 drivers out there on the grid and everything, and you're just trying to make sure that they all have the opportunity to put in a qualifying lap. But yeah, definitely an interesting setup that they have for F2, and I think they did the same for F3.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It kind of, it obviously helps to alleviate the parking lot concerns that I end up, developing around Anthony Noakes corner, or what has developed in the past. I believe the kind of directives from the FIA have changed. I believe the rules have changed to where they're trying to create environments where the drivers and the teams don't feel like they have to like pile themselves up there at the end of the track there. But it's clear you don't just have to do it with different like uh procedures. You can do it with different like formats basically to try and get more real estate on the track basically like for each of these drivers and cars. And I think it's a positive. Like, is that the one that the sport should like land on as a whole? Maybe not. Maybe there's some iteration of that, but very similar to the sprint races in Formula One. I think it's interesting and definitely for the better that they're at least trying different solutions for these different like kind of track specific issues that you don't see this at this track or that track or another track. Like, it really is like a Monaco specific problem, and that where you have like um you got to figure out something to do with that. And so the format that they do here in F2 and F3, I think it's a big win, or at least the attempt is a big win.
Yeah, I think it's a smart decision because you're just like, for one, I think if you don't do something like that, you're just going to end up with nobody getting like really good lap. Like, you just get a few people who actually get a good lap, and everyone else is just queued up the entire time,
Hmm.
or affecting people who are on their hot laps and everything. So it is definitely a track specific issue, and it makes sense in this instance. I would be curious when it comes to like Formula One and whatnot. What the I don't think you could do it in Formula One because we see the track evolution across just one qualifying session and everything. So if you have one qualifying session with 10 drivers and that they do all of their qualifying or whatever, and then you do another one, like the potential for drivers to not make it out from just because they were in the first session. It would be a kind of weird thing to try and balance to some extent. I feel like the second session just would in most cases have the best finishing
Hmm.
positions and everything. So you'd get all 10 drivers from the second session and then maybe only 5 from the first. But I'm sure there's like tweaks or ideas that you could do for that. Maybe do Q1 that way and then drop 2, 3 drivers from the bottom 2 or 3 from each of those sessions and then bring them together, or who knows. But there's I do appreciate making track specific changes to things, which I'll probably mention a little bit later when we get into more of the F1 talk and everything.
Hmm.
But I think that it's a smart decision in this instance, especially with the number of cars on the grid for F2 and F3.
Yeah, for sure. Because usually it is only a problem in the first qualifying session, and then as like and then as you lose cars, obviously it just gets easier to get a lap in. But yeah, as you increase the number of cars on the track, giving them space makes sense. Because yeah, if you inhibit track times from a lot of the drivers, then what you end up is like these weird out of position cars. And then from that, you can derive like, okay, well, if there's a bunch of out of position cars because of like wrenches in the works, like, okay, then it's not actually that like competitive of an environment because there's all these like effectively like random number generators that are going off all the time, and it's not about like your strategy or how well you did. It's like, did I just like win the lottery basically in this scenario?
Yeah.
What are your
I
thoughts on that?
I I mean, I would agree. I feel like it if you're looking for like exciting maybe from drivers being out of position and everything, like it can increase the variability, which I mean, I think people like to see
Yeah, to a
different
certain extent.
sometimes, like where it gives that extra bit of intrigue to some extent of thing drivers being out of position. But again, like you said, I don't think it is the most competitive way for that to go down. Like if you're wanting to see the best drivers competing on level playing surfaces and everything, to have these different like weird things thrown in. So
For
I
sure.
yeah, I'm definitely with you on that.
But yeah, I think for F2 the feature race was very exciting. We had all sorts of shenanigans going on. The one thing that was crazy to me was Vershore's car dying, and then he's like able to get it going. That was honestly kind of heart stopping for me.
Yeah, and like just like a weird incident. Very rarely do you see a car like losing power. He's on the team radio being like, the car is dying, and then he runs over the chicane, and all of a sudden it just like jumps the car back into gear or whatever, and he's able to continue on for a while. And also be competitive. Like I feel like typically we see when cars are dying, they just kind of trail off to the sides a bit. And
Mm-hmm.
DNF, he made a little run for it for quite a while. But yeah, the feature race was definitely exciting. We saw a good battle between Ollie Behrman and Kimi Antonelli on different tire strategies, or at least warmth of tires and everything, with Behrman getting by at the hairpin with the inside out a little bit. And that's like, again, it's nice to see the smaller cars being able to make those maneuvers on the tighter track. It definitely made it more exciting than what we're seeing in the F1 race, at least.
Yeah, that's actually like a really interesting angle. Like on the Monaco weekend, like if you want like wheel to wheel racing on the race, like you actually got to watch F2 and F3 because it's a little bit more competitive if you're, if you prefer more strategy angle, the as Brundle referred to it on the cast, the game of chess that they like to make up is going on. Yeah, the real excitement is actually in the F2 and the F3 races. Looking at like the standings after the F2 race, I was actually pretty impressed with Hadjar. Gets third consecutive podium here in the feature race. Gets him a solid amount of points here. Closes the gap to P1. So yeah, Hadjar putting himself in a pretty good position here with the feature race podium.
Yeah, and he jumps Zane Maloney, who had been the P1 in the driver's standings up until this race, before getting jumped by Paul Aaron and Hadjar. But the in the feature race, I mean, some of the issues, I guess, with Maloney, he unfortunately gets hit by Joshua Dirksen towards the end of the race, which ends up bringing out the virtual safety car. O'Sullivan is able to he's able to get a free pit stop with the virtual safety car. Had just stayed out really as long as possible, like praying for some sort of incident to basically pit on the last lap. Gets very lucky with the virtual safety car there, with the contact to Maloney, and comes out just ahead of Hadjar there at the end to snipe the win from him right at the end of the race. I did feel bad for Hadjar, of course, like you did absolutely nothing wrong. You drove the best race and you just got just unlucky enough to lose out there. I was a little like, I can understand the frustration, but the reaction over the team radio, I was a little like iffy on. Like, he was just, and I mean, they're young drivers, and I can understand how frustrating. I mean, I yell when I play Call of Duty when I think that the game bugs out on me, and it probably didn't. But like, I feel like I'm not in a professional setting and everything, and like,
Sure,
even though
yeah,
you're a young driver, this is your job. You do have to kind of keep your emotions in check. And that was one thing that I was like a little taken back by. Maybe not disappointed or anything, but just like there's some growth there that needs to happen, because the like, that's the way racing goes sometimes. Like, Max obviously had a similar thing happen with Lando in the Miami Grand Prix, and I mean, the way the standings are going right now, that could be consequential towards the end of the season in the constructors and driver standings, losing out on those points and everything. So it's like you have to kind of take the good with the bad. Sometimes things just don't pan out quite perfectly for you, and you just gotta roll with the punches. But again, he's a young driver. It was really like, this is the race that these young drivers probably circle on their calendar bigger than any other one. Like, it's Monaco. It would be huge and awesome to win there, but yeah, a bummer for him, and I understand the frustration, but was slightly like bummed that the reaction was as bad as it was.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you can understand, like, you can understand the feeling, but it makes me think of Yuki Tsunoda and his like early years with when it was AlphaTauri. Like, some of his
Comparison.
like, his team radios were ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
And like, yes, you can understand the feeling, but look at Yuki now, where like he's significantly matured his angle, and I'm sure has also found it's endeared the team towards him, where like you're now easier to talk to get feedback from, and it'll improve the relationship. So not just like from a broadcast angle, from a marketability towards the upper echelons of teams that are going to be watching,
Yeah.
you are you're doing yourself a disservice behaving that way like on a team radio, because like there's gonna be no consequences for it like now, right? Like your race
Yeah.
engineer isn't gonna, you're not gonna get like grounded or whatever. They're just gonna say like, yeah, Hajar, like, we understand, blah blah blah. They may say, next time not on the radio, but I guess what I'm getting at is you can't be aware of the consequences down the line where, in a conversation at Alpine, some guy says like, "Oh, what about Hadjar from Formula 2?" It's like, "Wow, I've heard his team radio, like oh man, you don't want to lose with him." And then you're never thought of again, right?
Yeah.
So, while it doesn't personally offend me, and I mean I'm the first one to flip a table, it just thinking of professionalism, what we want out of our drivers, from like a, God forbid, like a role model standpoint in some regards, like that's just not it. Like I'm not mad at it personally, but I bet teams later on will be.
Well, yeah, and like you said with Yuki, well, like another component of, so yeah, he seems more even keeled now. He's like doesn't have these big explosive reactions and everything. That also probably helps with his driving overall to
For sure.
stay more on just level, even, like, like that sucks, let me just head down and get after it on these laps and everything, and try and push as hard as I can, without like being flustered or upset. It probably improves that. But yeah, like when you're, I mean, you see it in other sports all the time. You see it in the NBA, in the NFL, when they're looking and there's this guy that's just a stud, like looks like he would be the best player out of anyone, the most athletic guy, jumps the highest, runs the fastest, throws the furthest, whatever it is. And then there's these whispers, oh, he wasn't a great locker room guy. Oh, like his team really wasn't a big fan of it. Like people were like kind of stayed away because he just had this bad attitude. And you see those guys who are supposed to be the first, second, third pick in the draft falling down to the end of the first round, second round, third round, and not getting drafted and making as much money because purely their attitude was
Hmm.
reflected by the people they interviewed about this guy, talking to the person. Like those things make a difference. And yeah, like you said, coming up through, like, you don't want those, like, you don't want any blemishes that people could question on your resume, when they're looking at who's the next guy.
Hmm. Yeah, like do you think that Cardin kid from 2 years ago that chucked that wing, like, do you think he's getting any more looks? Like, do you think he
Haven't
ever
heard
raced
about him
again?
since.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Hadjar is just 2 steps away from that.
Yeah, it's, you
Yeah,
just have
obviously that's
to,
excessive.
no, but you do have to think about it. And like I said, like, you're young, but you still have to be professional and
Hmm.
really think of this as a job and everything for yourself, like, because it is, like, this is potentially your career. So you have to do your best to set yourself up well. But yeah, so just a crazy end to the F2 race with O'Sullivan taking the win there. But any final notes before we move over into the winners and losers of Formula One?
No, I think that was really solid.
Sweet. So why don't you lead us in with your winners for this week in the Monaco Grand Prix?
Yeah, I'll just give you some opening thoughts here. Charles Leclerc, and well, I guess I can like mix both of my winners because it's all from the Ferrari camp. So just
Okay.
give me a second here. So Charles Leclerc is my winner number one, Ferrari winner number two, but I'll give you a couple reasons for each. So for Charles, it clearly takes a lot to win in Monaco, and like that's been evidenced by the multiple attempts that he's had, even from pole. So from that perspective, like that whole Charles breaking the curse angle, like to me, I love that. I think that's great. He's persistent in that regard, hasn't let it get him down, and every time he shows up, gives it his best shot. This time nails qualifying like he has before, obviously goes well around here, but finally is able to overcome the three sisters or whatever it is, but and finally snatches that win. So for that reason, obviously winner of the Grand Prix, but for that reason, winner on the weekend for me. Where like it's also interesting because it's a back-to-back weekend where the story around a driver is now totally changed and shifted. Like no longer when we come to the Monaco weekend do we talk about like, oh, like get Charles with the rain cloud hanging over him and blah blah blah. It's like it's gone now. He won. He won.
Yeah.
He had a couple of attempts. Now he won. Now, if anything, he's the guy to beat at this track. All right, we know he qualifies well.
Yeah, three pole positions there at the circuit. Like that's his qualifying is impeccable.
Right. And then now, like, he can convert it. So I think at the track as an opponent and for Ferrari, I think he's, like, even scarier now. So, like, from that angle, I think it's fun where it's, like, another driver that has shifted the conversation around them, like, by their own volition, their own gumption, right? So I think that's exciting. And then this is just a cherry on the cake that I didn't even realize. He's the first Monegasque to win in Monaco for like 93 years or something.
So in the 93 years that they've raced there, so he is the first
Oh, he's
ever.
the first one.
Yeah,
Okay.
93 years of the Monaco of like Formula 1 in Monaco.
Wow.
Or the
Okay, so that's
Monaco
even
Grand
like
Prix.
more significant.
Yeah, so he is the first, which is just awesome. Super sick.
Crazy. Yeah. All right.
And
so
Ferrari's-
Charles Leclerc, my number one winner.
Also, Ferrari's 250th podium in Formula 1 with
That is crazy.
with that weekend, so
Well, because they're one of like the original constructors. They've been in Formula One damn near as long as it's been a thing. I'm sure
Yeah.
maybe some years they haven't had a car or whatever, but Ferrari is pretty synonymous with Formula One.
yeah, definitely. Well, and speaking of, so your second winner.
Yeah, dude, Ferrari, honestly. But even more specific than Ferrari, sleeper agent Ferrari driver Sergio Perez. That's my second winner.
I don't know about that one.
No, that's a bad joke. But I think, like, truly on the weekend for Ferrari, like, huge boon. And especially, like, where Max finishes, I think it was P6, Sergio crashes out, unfortunately, and, like, that was pretty brutal. But, like, this is the weekend where they take a chunk, like a mean chunk out of Red Bull and the lead that they have. Like, they are just, one good result away, like, from their own volition. Like, they don't even need the Red Bull failure now. Like, that was Monaco. Like, that was the fallen hurdle that they needed to, like, close that gap. Now it's like it's well within their own reach and, like, well within, winning by their own merit. They've truly swung the pendulum, like, back towards them in that regard. And I believe, unfortunately, it feels like Ferrari has two drivers that are ready to battle. Both Leclerc and Sainz are hungry for wins, and you just don't feel that same kind of maybe drive or hunger or whatever from Sergio specifically, and just like in that Ferrari versus Red Bull fight, yeah, I think Monaco weekend was huge for them, and I think is just going to instill the most amount of morale, the most amount of confidence.
Yeah, I mean it's a hugely pivotal point for the constructors standings in particular. But also just live correction. You were right. I was wrong. So first in 93 years, the third Monaco Grand Prix was won by a Monegasque, Louis Chiron. So I just had to double check because I was like, wait, am I right about that? So live correction, I was not right. But you were first in 93 years and first in the World Championship era of Formula One.
Okay, well, that's pretty exciting. But yeah, those are my two winners here. Who were yours?
So for my winners this week, it's first off the entire country of Monaco, along with Charles Leclerc. I was excited, like you said, back to back weeks of people kind of overturning these doubts and curses or whatever you want to call them, with Lando no wins, picking up his first, and then Charles Leclerc winning the Monaco Grand Prix after some just unlucky experience there. I mean, whatever you have to say about the race, he put himself in pole position, which has won, like, in the championship era, like, pole position has now won, I think, like 32 out of 40 some times or something
Right.
ridiculous like that.
Crazy.
And he put himself in the best position. So just with that, the win, everything, massive congratulations to him. It's so cool to see a driver win their home race. Like that's just such a awesome experience for the fans, for the driver. Like I love to see the emotion that comes from that. So that's my first winner. My second winner is Oscar Piastri. I mean, a beautiful drive, great qualifying, was putting pressure on Leclerc throughout the early stages of the race before he had to kind of just fall into his zone and just see what happens and everything, hold position, not kill his tires too much. But he's been consistently up there over the last few races, just throughout the season so far. And he really just impressed me with the just kind of veteran way that he came in and drove so well around Monaco after things haven't quite panned out super well. Gets his first podium of the year and everything to hop up there. He had the sprint race win last year, but great to see him on the podium. He had 3 P4s up until that point, so that was my second winner on the weekend.
Yeah, I think a solid one as well. McLaren just like continues to impress. It's really exciting to see them there in the fight.
Yeah, but leading into the losers for this week, why don't you go ahead and hit me with those?
So I think what happened between the two Haas drivers and Sergio Perez on lap one was enough to be, my first and biggest loser of the weekend. Double DNF, teammate on teammate violence is like wild to me, especially like in that scenario. It feels really rammy. It feels really over aggressive. It feels like he's underestimating,
Everything.
yeah, like many of what you imagine your instincts would be telling you as a racing driver in that scenario. That whatever gap was there closed almost immediately, upon opening as well. So yeah, I think just like really wild move in that regard. And it just makes me think like now it's like a string of like quote unquote bad behavior from Kevin Magnussen, and I'm just curious why he sees this as the angle, or like why he sees like some of the things he's done as the best way forward. Yeah, I guess I'm just like kind of confused.
It's starting to feel kind of desperate to some extent for me, with the like wanting to secure a seat. Hulkenberg's already secured it. He was sitting there and he was just like why? Like why did like why was that needed after he got taken out there? Because Magnussen had a great start. He had jumped up past Zhou. He had jumped up past Hulkenberg. He's right on Perez's tail there. Like, you've already you got past two people right off the start. Like, that's a strong start in Monaco. Like, put yourself in this position and like see where things go and everything. Why just try, like, you're just pushed your luck too far. And from my side, like, I don't even believe, because Haas and more Haas was my first loser this week as well. Like, I think Magnussen, his reaction and like taking zero blame was just a ploy. I don't believe that he believes that for a second, but the fact that he's on 10 penalty points and everything, and it was a first lap incident, I think he is just absolutely throwing the, hey, I did nothing wrong at the FIA to try to avoid the race ban. Because that's easily a two, like, if you get penalized there, that's not a 1 point penalty. That's 2 points, and you get the one race ban because you have 12 penalty points on your license now. Like, that's the only reasoning, because you can't tell me, one, that you truly believe that you were far enough alongside Sergio Perez there that he should have done anything differently. I don't think Perez squeezed him. I don't think Perez moved suddenly or anything. Plus, in the replay, which I thought I had seen, and like watching the slow-mos afterwards, Magnussen hit the wall before he hit Perez. Whether he was trying, like, seeing that gap shrink there, and instead of backing out, tried to go a little bit right to try and hang in there even longer. Like, he bumped the barrier before he took out Perez. So it was like a combo. Like, if him not backing out, even if he hadn't hit the wall, the same thing would have happened. But instead of backing out, like, he taps the wall and then goes into Perez. I thought I had missed something when, like, during the race start and everything, because there was like nothing. Then all of a sudden they're showing these images of Sergio Perez's car just absolutely obliterated. And I was like, oh, okay, I get, like, he's not in the car, so I assume he's okay, because now that I was like, but it took me a minute to realize that they were like, oh, I guess we really shouldn't show this until we make sure all the drivers are good. Because his car was not good. Like, that was, it's impressive how the only thing that was intact is the part around his body. Like, that's incredible from just safety for Formula One and the design of these cars. Like, that blew me away.
Yeah, it's it was pretty scary, but like, the images of that car ripped apart are scary. But if you see, like, him just like getting up and out of the car, and he's literally just like doing the shrug of like damn, dude, like, why'd you do that? You know, like, he's these cars are very safe, which is wild.
It is. It's crazy, and even like the damage to the car was estimated to be like 2 to 3 million in damage, which, again, like, I still have this feeling that at least part of that cost should be shared by the offending team in these incidents if there is an offending team. I guess the FIA didn't want to look at this one enough to actually even call it a racing, or they were like racing incident and just breezed on their way, which I'm still mind blown because I don't think Sergio did anything wrong there. But yeah, getting hit with a $2 to $3 million bill when you really didn't do anything wrong is pretty shitty for Red Bull's side, and for Checo getting knocked out, who was my second loser. Like, didn't really do anything wrong other than, I mean, awful qualifying. Like, that was terrible, but that shouldn't have ended that way for his weekend.
Well, yeah, I definitely agree. And, like, in some ways, the lack of excitement from this race, like, precipitates from that moment exactly, right? Where everybody pits onto their second compound of tire and then just, like, manage and run it all the way to the end. So, like, you don't even get the, like, possibility of excitement at the one stop that you know is going to happen at the pit stop. Yeah, like, no, sorry, that happened on lap 2. Like, you just have to watch 76 laps now of the same. Hello?
Sorry, yeah, you were. I'm still semi losing you there.
What am I like? What am I like? DC'd or something?
Yeah, I lost you for a second. You were frozen. And
That's
yeah,
brutal.
it froze again. Jeez, I don't know what's going on there. A little funky, but go ahead.
If I'm clear now.
You seem good again. So that was weird. It was just a little blip there for a few seconds.
Oh, weird. We must have lost our internet connection. But yeah, what was I saying? Like,
so we were talking about Sergio losing out, didn't do anything wrong. Wow, I lost my train of thought because of the freeze there too. But
yeah, big time.
Sergio
Perez was your second loser. That's our winners and losers section. Now let's go through some final thoughts on the teams that we didn't hit.
Well, so one other thing that I guess I found was pretty just. I'll bring us back. We were talking about the one opportunity to get passes in the race, the pit stop. We didn't even get to see it because of the red flag changing tire compounds and everything. We did see a couple of drivers get to pit towards the end of the race. We saw Lewis pit because he had the pit window behind him, and then Max afterwards having the pit window. I thought maybe Max would have a shot at George at the end, but what was kind of mind-blowing to me just across the race was hearing afterwards that, and it makes sense that the drivers were preserving their tires, but that Max came out and was like, yeah, we were just 3 or 4 seconds off the pace the entire race because you just can't pass here. And every driver was just driving super slow where they could to save their tires. So yeah, definitely not the ideal excitement race. But because of that incident at, on the first lap, but I mean that's the way racing goes. We talked about it in Formula 2 with O'Sullivan getting the free pit stop at the last second to take the win. In this instance, Leclerc gets to switch, doesn't even have to worry about the most dangerous part of the race to lose positions other than his own errors. And so just driving an impeccable race leaves him in that position to take the win there. So it's that's just driving sometimes. It just pans out that way. But before we get to the team results and talking through that I did want to kind of have a brief mention and discussion of. So we see this happen. I think both you and I and a lot of Formula One fans want Monaco to stay on the calendar, even though this is the kind of racing we get sometimes. What are your thoughts on, and I told you I would bring it back from early in the episode, track specific rules and decisions from the FIA for things like mandatory pit stops, mandatory use of different quality of tires and everything for a race like Monaco. I think we want to see it on the circuit, but if it's not good quality racing, or there really is no team element like we see in other races with either the strategy or the pit stops making a difference or something like that. Like, what are your thoughts on like potentially implementing something for Monaco specifically to help ensure a better quality of race to keep it on the grid?
Yeah, I don't know what would be an interesting change that doesn't just feel like forcing an outcome from, from the FIA. It's tough, I think, for the modern day Formula One fan to think of these weekends as like a whole thing. People just want to tune in on a Sunday and see like the most exciting thing. So for Monaco to have staying power, I think I agree with you that something would have to be done as far as like track specific designations, but I also would not be able to offer up like an interesting solution myself unless unless it was like, okay, something about like you said, like a mandated tire choice or something like this. But me personally, I don't mind at all. Like, it is not minute to minute the most exciting thing, but I think a 78 lap race where endurance comes into question, team strategy comes into question, pace comes into question, the overall performance of the weekend comes into question, where like more than any other track, what you do on Saturday has consequence. So you are not only having to hook it up on qualifying and then look to do well on Sunday. Like, qualifying is very important, and then also like the race then is very important, because if you fall asleep, you give an opportunity for the drivers behind you to get that impossible overtake, right? So and this was my note for Albon here in Williams, but I'll throw it to you right now, like for a good example. I think tracks like Monaco are able to make different drivers shine, specifically like an Albon, where points finish for him is awesome, but it like actually makes sense that Albon performs well here. So your one lap pace is significantly called into question. Like, if you can't hook it up for 3 sectors, you're fucked on the Monaco Sunday. And I believe that that's worth something, because it gives the opportunity for drivers like Albon, or an individual who we've touted for their defensive drives, their ability to nurse tires for an insane amount of laps. Like, this guy knows how to not get overtaken. He may not be the best progressive racer that we have, but his defensive drives have rewarded Williams with a few points grabbing positions here. And I believe tracks like Monaco, while they may not be a progressive circuit, it rewards defensive driving and also rewards one lap pace from the drivers who, on any other weekend, like, oh, we love to talk about how great Charles Leclerc is at one lap pace. And damn, like, isn't George Russell like really quick on one lap? But then once we get to the track where like that's the package of your driver skill that matters, like, oh, this is the first track now that we want to take off the calendar now. So like, why is a skill that we reward over here the thing that we want to get rid of here at Monaco? So for me personally, I really enjoy the challenge of Monaco. And I'm not even on it for like it's been on the calendar, so keep it on the calendar. Honestly, like I don't even care about that. I genuinely enjoy the circuit. I genuinely enjoy that it feels like one of the races where the whole weekend matters. You can't just rock up on Sunday and like oh, what's going to happen here? Like I like that different skills are rewarded for the teams and the drivers as a whole. I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I don't hate that take at all. I think it's I mean, we've talked about it with in the past with Formula One and the different circuits, like bringing out different qualities. Or I mean, we talk about Sergio Perez being like a street circuit specialist and different things like that. Different drivers having those skill sets. So I definitely am with you on the side of like an Alex Albon. Like this gives him the opportunity in a car that's maybe not competitive for the top 10 to get in the points and everything, because he just was able to hook it up with really solid just performance and that those finite differences that you can make in qualifying around Monaco. I think on the other side, one of the things that I was why I was curious about like your opinion on just having track specific maybe rules and whatnot is that we sort of do at Monaco already. You talked about it being semi-endurance with the 78 laps and everything, but that's still shorter than the 300-kilometer race distance that we hit on every other circuit. You only do 260 kilometers at Monaco. So this race could easily, if they wanted to make it just a slog, you could make it 85 laps or something like that. I think would hit the 300-kilometer mark and everything.
Okay.
So the fact that we have like track specific things, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing something track specific. I think on the other side of that is like, yeah, like qualify, like this does mean that Saturday really, really matters more than it does in every other race weekend across the grid. But also, like, if Saturday's the only thing that matters and Sunday doesn't really, because it's just like we had this week, the top 10 finished the same positions that they all started in at the beginning of the race, then is the whole weekend really mattering, or is it just Saturday that matters and then Sunday you're just like coasting through? I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think this is a weird circumstance because of the red flag right off the bat and the changing of tires and everything. But just to play devil's advocate, I feel like it's just difficult to like it's a very fine line. I'm with you on very much on the side of it's a unique track and it evokes like a skill, and if you're looking at the strongest driver overall across the year being the driver's champion, then being successful at all these different types of circuits and everything, even say if Max wins the championship this year, which it's now getting a bit tighter and everything with these last couple of weeks, like that best bad finish that I talked about in IndyCar being something that was discussed about Colton Herta. If Max's best or worst finish across the year is a P6 at Monaco, then the likelihood of him taking that drivers championship is still super strong when we've seen some of these other drivers have worse finishes already this year. So I think I love Monaco. I agree. I love the circuit. I think it deserves its place. And maybe one of those changes that would make it more exciting is just with the regulations in Formula One. I think the cars are going to get smaller in 2026 a little bit. So maybe, like we were saying with F2 and F3, that will just allow them to maneuver a bit more and will make some of those races a bit more exciting in terms of overtake opportunities and everything than currently they are.
Yeah, I can feel that, and yeah, maybe improvements are not bad. I wouldn't want to see the track get homogenized or taken away for homogenization's sake.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there. I think of anything, I would to keep it there. I would like to see some changes that the teams and drivers feel like would make it slightly more standard of a race weekend, maybe like a mandatory use of all three tires or something like that.
Sure.
That would help to ensure that something like this, a red flag on lap one, which is not ridiculously unlikely in Monaco, then just destroys the potential excitement for the rest of the race. This year, definitely a little different with Leclerc winning, being from Monaco and everything, and his first win at the Monaco Grand Prix. But yeah, I think that's I would love to see it stay. Hopefully this is just kind of a one-off year in terms of the way that pans out.
Sure. Yeah, I think mostly I agree.
Yeah, but yeah, moving forward into just running through some of the team results here and everything. What were, I guess, some of the other notes that you wanted to touch on here?
What could we say here that's interesting? I think Alonso improving his position was solid. On a track where it is tough going from, I think it was like P14 to P10, I think it was. Just improving your position that much during the race, I think is really strong. I think a
P11.
lot of it.
He thought
Okay.
he was P10 and was
Oh, okay.
defending for it, but he was P11.
Okay, gotcha. Well, then I was fooled too. But yeah, I think just being able to make up even a couple of positions is really strong. And I say this specifically for Alonso and Aston Martin because they have struggled. Their results have been kind of up and down. They haven't been able to, rub two pennies together kind of thing. So I think on a tough track, I think Alonso's performance was kind of indicative of his pedigree. Like, if anybody's going to find positions, it's going to be him. So I think from that angle, that was kind of a smaller exciting element for me because I like Alonso.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It definitely a good performance from him across the board to be able to improve. There was not a lot of ability for that. I mean, we even see Carlos Sainz with that first lap with the puncture getting to maintain his place because of the red flag and all, which is interesting and very, but again, very lucky. Like, it's the precedent of being through the first sector before you set the new position order and everything. But the red flag came out. Like, it's unfortunate for Lando and all, but that's the way it goes. Sometimes you get a lucky break. The other crazy lap one drama though that I wanted to talk about with one of these other teams that we haven't mentioned was the Alpine boys and Ocon just absolutely sending it into Pierre Gasly, who miraculously, because of the red flag, being able to get some repairs done during that time, the car's in shape to be able. I think they replaced an entire side pod on Gasly's car during the red flag to get him out there, and they were not fully able to replace the floor. But I think from what I had seen on the replays, they had these metal brackets that they had re-secured the edge of the floor onto the car or something like that to be able to like keep the downforce and all. He ends up getting points out of it, but I mean, from the Alpine side, just really, really rough. Their team principal was talking about there being consequences and tough decisions when it comes to Ocon, whether that means in terms of their drivers lineup for next year, in terms of current season punishments or whatnot, who knows what may come there. Ocon ends up getting a 5-place grid penalty handed to him for the Canadian Grand Prix from that incident and everything, since he had the 10-second penalty and then retired, so wasn't able to serve that penalty. So just a stupid mistake from Ocon there. Like, he's really... I feel like we've now just keep seeing the Alpine team having these inter-driver struggles and conflicts and everything, and it's just going to keep dragging them towards the back of the grid if they keep up at that rate. I mean, Williams with Albon picked up 2 points this weekend. They now jumped Alpine in the constructors standing. So
yeah, I mean, to me that's wild. Like, if you want to dive bomb anybody else on the grid, go for it, dude. Like, they're your opponents. That's fine. I understand that your teammate is your biggest competition, quote unquote, because they're the only ones with the same car as you, that line. But at the end of the day, like, they're still your teammate. They are your teammate. They're on your team. And to, like, be that aggressive where you could make both cars lose. And then if both cars lose, that means the whole team is losing. Like, that just feels like a really... to use the term again, it feels like a really rammy move. It's impatient to your term. It feels desperate in some regards where, like, you don't even know why. They're not fighting for anything. They're just here. Yeah. They're just here. So, yeah, I'm questionable all the way down. I don't... man, yeah, I just hate that shit.
Yeah, any
way you look at it.
And I mean, you have them both. You're starting P10 and P11 on the grid. Like, you are in a position to, like, at Monaco, that just one car has an issue in front of you, and you're double points, and you immediately remove yourself from contention there by doing that, and it just... it's unfortunate. I guess I'll say it's very fortunate from the side of Gasly that he's able to pick up a point there and stay in the top 10, that the car's able to be repaired and everything. Because, like, again, like Perez, I feel like did nothing wrong and could have just very easily had the same result as Perez of a DNF from Gasly's side as well.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, very, very fortunate in that aspect for Alpine, but I'm curious to see what their reaction is when it comes to Ocon and everything. I mean, now we've seen and like, even if at Imola like I was a little like Gasly when he was upset on the radio about like I was supposed to have priority. How come Ocon got a good lap at the end of this session and I didn't? Whether that's Ocon bunching up the field and messing up his own teammate by doing that or what. It seems like there's just too much conflict in that team for this driver lineup to be the same lineup next year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm curious to see how that affects the decisions that they're making over at the Alpine team.
Yeah, it's just wild. I mean, like look 3 races ago, from the perspective of those drivers. Excuse me, look 3 races ago, like, dude, they would have killed for a P10 and a P11, and then you're just like throwing it away into Portier, just like whatever, it's
Yeah,
my teammate, who cares? That's wild to me. I don't know about that.
yeah,
I might argue we could hand out a Go Tiffy award for that one.
Oh, I think I'd be with you on that. Like that is just a yeah, bad move crash. So I think that would be worthwhile of the goatee fee.
It might be like a toss up between, Magnussen and this one. Like honestly, I think they're both like pretty like aggressive and egregious. But yeah, man, the fact that it's like teammate, like straight up teammate on teammate, I would hand the Gotifi award out to Ocon in this scenario because dude, that's such a bad look.
Yeah, like I think Magnuson would just be like Gotifi by proxy because he didn't take out his teammate at first.
He
He
bumped
took out the
and took him out.
So yeah, I feel like Ocon would be deserving of that there.
Crazy.
But the only other like real highlights other than looking at the drivers and constructors standings a little bit before we kind of wrap out the F1 talk was I was absolutely just I cannot speak more highly of Alex Jakes and his call on the broadcast at the end of the Grand Prix with Charles coming through to win. It was so touching talking about his father, Jules Bianchi, his home race, the city and the country of Monaco and everything. For him as he was coming through, the storytelling aspect and just the hype that brought after like a relatively like boring mid section of that race and everything was just I mean it like had me welling up in the eyes and everything. It was really impressive. I don't know if you heard that one or the Crofty. I assume you listen to the F1 broadcast, right?
I often do the international broadcast, so I was hearing coffee
Okay.
for this one.
Gotcha. So I would definitely check it out. It was I'll send you the link for the call at the end. Crofty's wasn't like I saw a lot of conflicted people online. It was similar to what you and I have seen in the League of Legends, talking about broadcasters where like there can't be like this person did it really well, and I wasn't as big of a fan of this one, but it was fine. It was like this one was great and that one sucked, and like just
Oh yeah.
comparing the two and putting down the one guy instead of like just hyping up the guy that you enjoyed their call. I didn't think Crofty's was like bad. I was surprised that it wasn't a little more hyped than it was. Like, but he does have some of these like puns and just like it's very smooth the way that he says it and everything. So it still came across well and everything, but yeah, the Alex Jakes call at the end was really, really solid. So I wanted to shout that out.
Nice. Yeah, it's often interesting. I was actually having a conversation today along those same lines where the cast or the call can like really elevate a moment in a lot of ways. If you have a skillful commentator, and while he may not always be my flavor, I do appreciate his passion, his love for the sport, his skill at what he does. Like he truly is good at what he does. So yeah, it's fun when they can kind of elevate a moment and make it a little larger than life. That's exciting.
Yeah, so that sort of wraps out the Monaco Grand Prix. But looking at the drivers and constructors standings here at the end, that's really one of the big effects that we had from this race, with Max finishing P6. The gap's 31 points to P2 right now, down to Leclerc. It's going to be tight to the end. I think we're seeing a much more competitive year after last year being a little more out of reach for most of the season. But yeah, super exciting that we have another, I guess, 16 rounds or so, 15 rounds of racing with this tight of a fight at this point. So I'm looking forward to that. And with the constructor standings as well, it's now 24 points away from Red Bull to Ferrari. Very small gap there. I mean, that, like I said before, it was a double DNF away. Now it's a single DNF away from Ferrari being up right level with Red Bull. So yeah, really, really exciting way for the season to be shaping up at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, just give me like two more races of unexpected results and we've got a season. It's going to be kind of a toss up going into, each and every race. I think right now, obviously, you still say Red Bull's favored it. It was just a bad weekend. But it's just Max did such a fast, I think it is the Red Bull camp, but that's what I'm saying. Give me a couple more races of give me a Piastri win, give me a Carlos Sainz podium, give me a Max like engine issue. You've got a season.
Oh yeah, and I mean, not that the being in the Red Bull camp is like I mean, I think that's just he dominated last year. The car still seems to typically have the fastest pace at the moment, so like
Sure.
it makes sense to be in that side. But weirder things have happened in Formula One, so there's still a lot left to play for, which is great. I think after the first couple of weeks of the season, people are like throwing in the towel already, and we were sitting there like, it's a long season, everyone. And yeah, like so far we're now in a pretty contentious title fight, or much closer than we have been in a year. so I'll definitely take it. But any other final notes before we hit the cool down lap here? Alrighty. So well, I guess I'll lead off into the cool down lap this week. We're gonna do day in the life. So I just thought I would talk a little bit about the bachelor weekend that I went on this past weekend for my buddy Darren. We went out to Minnesota. It was just a fun weekend overall. Got to hang out. It was neat to be in a place that I haven't been before. So a new state checked off on my list. Not that that's like a bucket list for me, but I thought it was cool to just see a new place with friends and all. We went out, had a boating day where we're out on one of the lakes out in Minnesota. I jumped off the boat into 30-foot water that was pretty chilly, and so that was like kind of exciting. I didn't think about I knew how deep it was. Then I jumped off the boat into the water, and as soon as I hit the water and started sinking down, I was like, oh, get me back to the top, because my brain clicked. I'm like, oh yeah, there's like no bottom anywhere close to me here. I'm gonna go ahead and get back up to the top of the water. So that that was fun, but overall, cool experience. We went to a baseball game. Some of the guys went to a basketball game, but just fun time hanging out overall for the weekend.
That sounds really exciting. I'm happy to hear that I'm not the only one with a fear of deep water. I scurry like nothing else. Yeah.
It was not like, I mean, it was very weird. It was very dark. It was much darker than I anticipated. When I jumped in and kind of opened my eyes, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna get up here." But I'm typically not crazy scared of deep water. Like I think I would go snorkeling or maybe scuba a little bit. Um,
Okay.
but in that instant, I was like, "Oh yeah, like middle of a boat, very dark, or middle of a lake, very dark." I'm just gonna get back up, and it was super cold, so I think my brain was like moving a mile a minute when I hit the
Sure.
water as well. So yeah, fun, but but yeah, after that I stayed on the boat, so warmed myself up a little bit.
Hell yeah, yeah, where it's safe and dry. My day in the life, just a nice Sunday lunch with my mom. Me and Sarah went down to visit for a little for the U.S. holiday. We celebrated over the weekend. Mom made up some London broil, one of like my favorite cuts of meat. So that was really nice. It's fun when I go over there now because her house smells of good marijuana, and it's fun to just like smoke her weed and her bowl. So that's like a really good time. I get, just pack it, go onto the back deck. So we had some good smoke, some good conversation. One thing that I find funny about like just life in general, but it's pretty specific to my mom sometimes as well, where like, she'll ask what's new, what's going on. And in my head, like five things, like a list of five things would populate of like, oh, I could tell you about this, but it's stuff that nobody cares about, nobody knows. It's like deep, obscure things, that I could be like, well, this, I could tell you about this. So I know they don't give a shit. So questions like what's new, what's going on, they really make me laugh because I know you don't want to hear what I would tell you. I think that's very funny.
I think yes and no. I'll say I feel like the question is thrown out there because I think to some extent our parents know that like we don't always remember to tell them like some of the cool like thing or like different things that are going on. But I
Sure.
think yeah, the majority of the time it's just like still working, still eating food and living at my house. Like that's
Hmm.
things have not changed since last we talked. So, but I get what you mean. I feel like that could might be, and I could be wrong, but to me, in my mind, I imagine it being like uh, fishing and like maybe seeing if there's something to reel in there, or just in case.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And it is that kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you this, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a funny question. I think overall that's more of a thing of like I would small talk bothers me. I'd much rather have like, they call it big talk, like eh, tell me what you fear, tell me what the last thing you like cried at was or whatever. And like that's a conversation. Um but yeah, so that's my day in the life. Just a nice Sunday brunch with my mother.
Nice. I dig it. A nice way to enjoy the holiday weekend and everything
For sure.
as well. But, ladies and gentlemen, as always, the cool down lap brings us to the end of the episode. We're parking it in the garage here. But yeah, we really appreciate you guys spending time with us, listening, hearing what we have to say and talk about F1, motorsports, life. So yeah, we appreciate it, and it's been another fun time on the podcast.
Tell your friends about the show. New episodes after every race weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you. This has been the Tired Boys podcast. Peace out, everyone.
See ya.